That's my goal.
Christine, could you call the roll, please?
Larry Porter,
Here.
Jack Looney,
Here.
Garland Land,
Here.
Joe Zack,
Here.
Mark McDonald,
Here.
Rick Dreyer,
Here.
Jerry Atkins,
Absent. Okay, now I need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting on October 24th, please.
I make a motion to approve.
Give a second.
Second.
Been made and seconded that we approve the minutes of the 24th October meeting. All in favor say aye or raise your hand.
We got call. Roll.
roll call.
Roll.
Oh, we got to approve that?
Yep, we got a roll call.
I have a motion to approve the roll call.
No, I'm gonna call the roll for the
Call roll.
Just for approval. For approval of the motion.
Oh,
They changed.
Garland Land. Go ahead.
So shoot.
Larry Porter,
Yes.
Jack Looney,
Yes.
Garland Land,
Yes.
Joe Zack,
Yes.
Mark McDonald,
Yes.
Rick Dreyer,
Yes.
Okay, now can we go? Can we call the roll on the other side of the room? Okay, according to the agenda, we have a presentation by IPL Production Update, discussion and next steps with Mark Randall. Now, according to the information I've received, are we supposed to have a new member here to replace you at a time, Mr. Randall?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Well, that's what I was told. That's why I'm asking. So that's not on the agenda.
No.
You won't introduce him and give us his qualifications or anything like that, huh?
I'm sorry, what?
You won't introduce him and give us his qualifications or anything at this
No,
time?
what I was going to tell you was that the city manager wanted to be here, and he was going to talk about some of these changes, but he just could not make it today. So we'll just have to wait for him to. He'll said he'll be at your next meeting to further clarify future plans about management. But for the basically what we've done is he's shifted some of the departments around. The utilities will now be under the oversight of the other assistant city manager, Adam Norris. But in the interim, before we get a management of IPL, I'm going to continue as I've been, even after that reorganization for a while. But he'll be here at your next meeting to further explain this. He just was unable to be here today.
And the city manager told me you're still in charge of IPL,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Well, then let's go to the presentation then.
All right. There you go. All right. Can you hear me? All right. It's great to be here today. Wanted to make a presentation. We're calling the IPL production update and discussion of next steps. This was a presentation that the city manager had requested me to give to the council a few weeks ago. That it was to answer some questions. Council wanted to have an update on the status of IPL production. And when we had this on the council agenda a few weeks ago, it occurred to them that really it'd be more appropriate and proper to have this to the PUAB first. There's no action items for PUAB associated with this presentation, but as you see from your agenda, a resolution has been added asking PUAB to endorse recommendations that relative to the closure of Blue Valley. So we'll get to that resolution in a minute, but we'll go ahead first with this presentation as it was prepared. Okay, when we're talking about the production, we're talking about the production assets of IPL. We're really talking about the Blue Valley Power Plant and the 6 combustion turbines. This presentation, we're going to talk about regarding Blue Valley. We have a recap of where we are, how did we get to where we are today, talk about the current status of Blue Valley, then we're going to talk about next steps, including council decision points that are coming. And when you talk about next steps, you're talking about closure date, a transition plan for impacted employees, and possible repurposing of the facility. When we talk about the combustion turbines, it's basically the same thing. How did we get where we are today? What's the status of those CTs? And what are some of the next steps and decision points that related to the combustion turbines? So on the Blue Valley recap, just to take you back, June 2017 Management Partners Audit included a recommendation for an energy master plan. November of 2017, the City Council approved a contract with Burns & McDonnell for an energy master plan. In September of 2018, the master plan report was submitted. It recommended retiring Blue Valley plant and issuing an RFP for less expensive capacity to replace the capacity that would be lost with Blue Valley closure. In May 2019, the Council, after that RFP, approved a 10-year, $13.6 million capacity-only contract with Oneta for 45 megawatts. Oneta, if you recall, is a 1,133 megawatt natural gas combined cycle plant located in Coweta, Oklahoma, which went into service in 2002. The Oneta contract included an opt-out provision if transmission upgrade costs exceed $1 million. The city has notified Southwest Power Pool of our intent to replace Blue Valley capacity with the Oneta power purchase contract. The Oneta contract would start on June 1st, 2020. Now going to Blue Valley current status. The city is awaiting actual transmission costs and approval of capacity change from Southwest Power Pool. Preliminary indications are that transmission costs will be well under $1 million threshold for opt-out. And I'm pleased to tell you that since this presentation was put together, and in fact, earlier today, we got information from SPP, which confirmed that transmission cost is going to be well under the $1 million threshold for opt-out. So that means the Oneta contract is going to go forward and will take effect June 1st. But while we're waiting on final approvals for SPP on the closure and the change of capacity, the IPL production division is working to maximize revenue from Blue Valley prior to the closure. Increased operation of Blue Valley has resulted in new revenue, and while this new revenue is not enough to cover both the base costs for the plant, whether it was operating or not, plus the variable costs from actual operation, including fuel and overtime costs and other costs. Revenues have exceeded the variable costs by $400,000 since the start of the fiscal year at Blue Valley alone. I think this is really a testament to our production division, that realizing that plant is about to close, they're really putting pedal to the metal on it, really operating probably more than would be sustainable if we were going to try to nurse that equipment along for years. But in the meantime, they're really making an effort to maximize revenue before it closes. So as I say, the current level of production would not be sustainable long term, given the age of the equipment, but it can be done short term to maximize revenue. This is a chart that Elaine Kafis gave me. Elaine's back there. That she prepared that shows what the production at Blue Valley was for July and August in 2016, just to give you a comparison. So that shows you those were the days that it operated and to the extent to which it operated. The top line would be maximum generating operation. So that was 2016. Compare that chart with 2019. You can see that Blue Valley has operated many more days and at a high level of capacity in 19. And that's because they have told SPP that they would have their minimum runtime is much lower. It's gone, to believe, to 10 hours. Is that right now? Which is much lower than it has been historically. They're not requiring as much notice, and they're not having to operate as long. So this level of operation is pretty high, given the level or the age of the equipment. It's really not sustainable. But if this plant's going to be closing down on June 1st, they're really making an effort to maximize revenue. And so I really salute our production division for what they've done to try it, because they know that the budget is tight in at IPL, and for them to try to maximize revenue at this time is something that we should all really appreciate. So now talking about Blue Valley next steps. First off, we're talking about closure. Blue Valley closure is expected to occur about 6 months after SPP approval is received. And as you can tell from that resolution that you've got that we're going to be talking about later, that June 1st has been established as a closure date to correspond with the SPP approval timeline and the start of the capacity contract with Oneta. The actual date for the closure of the plant, though, will be set by the city council. And they're planning to do that at the next city council meeting after you've had an opportunity to, what they're asking for you to do today is to endorse their closure decision. Also, talking about next steps, then, and probably is a critically important part of this is a transition plan for impacted production employees. The 2019-2020 budget that we're in right now includes 40 full-time positions in production division. That's down from 60 as recently as 2017-18. So if you remember from the slides I had previously, they're operating a lot with less people. And so again, I really salute them for the efforts they've been making here in recent months. The Energy Master Plan recommended retaining as many as 23 FTEs in a much reduced production group focused on the care and operation of the 6 combustion turbines that are not associated with Blue Valley.
Mark, can we interrupt just a second?
Sure, go ahead.
Can you ask questions?
I have a question. The actual number of employees, why didn't we use actual number versus budgeted numbers? Because I think the actual were closer to 40 positions. Just because you had dollars into a budget really doesn't mean that you're saving any money whatsoever. So I'd like to see what the actual numbers
This slide
were.
isn't really about that. What this slide is just trying to demonstrate the relationship between what they used to do. That gives you an idea. At one point, I think their number was 70. I was just trying to give you an idea of, and I've already provided the PAB with actual numbers for all those years. So
Yeah, that's where I get that we had
something for
40
comparison.
people in production versus 60. I think this slide is giving a false indicator of how much reduction is actually taking place.
Well, this slide isn't really talking about about reduction and cost savings. This is really just talking about how I'm just trying to give you an idea that they've already reduced their numbers a lot. What I'm trying to do with this slide is to say, starting from 60, it's gone down to 40. They're now saying you should go to 23, which means 17 would be impacted immediately by the transition. That's what this is. That's the point of this slide.
We'll agree
I'd love to talk
disagree,
about financing of it, because I've provided that to you on other occasions. And yeah, we can sure look at.
Right.
Yeah, that's a
not
different point I'm making here. I'm just trying to tell you how many people are associated with the plant right now. Is 40.
Yes.
And 23 are recommended to be retained. That's all I'm trying to say. So if you want to ignore the line about how it's down from 60 were budgeted in 17, 18, feel free to do so. Point here being that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Marty. Yeah. Maybe you're going to have to get a microphone, though, so they can hear you, folks back home.
I think it would be, Mark, wouldn't it be easier if you had questions afterwards? If we
Sure,
write
it would.
down?
Okay.
To finish up on this, though, you have to understand that we budgeted for 40 a year ago at this time because we had 40 people on the payroll to start the year. In 2017, 2018, we have to budget at least 6-7 months ahead. And that's an entire 2 years before the 40 budget. So it's, it's indicative, but we've kept coming down and down since 2012.
Well, all I'm saying is you don't do a comparison between budgeted positions and actual positions.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay, let's hear the presentation. I'd ask the board members to write down notes on the specifications that they want to question or have comments about at the end
Great.
of the presentation. Is that
Great.
all right with everybody? Thank you.
Okay, so again, what we're trying to show on this slide is that of the 40 that are currently in production, the Energy Master Plan recommended retaining as many as 23 for the care and operation of the 6 CTs, which would mean that 17 would be affected by this closure. It's anticipated that future operations, of course, will determine what the actual number should be, but just going with what the master plan report was, there would be 17 positions that would be eliminated by closure. So it's important that a transition plan for impacted employees be part of this plan. And we've been saying that for more than a year, and it's true today as it was then, that we have to figure that out, and it has to be part of our thinking. So a consultant, Darda HR, has been retained by the city to assist human resources in the development of a transition plan. And it's expected that that plan would be ready for first council consideration in December. And the goal is to have a plan in place and present it to employees and to their union representation well in advance of the closure. That's the goal. And so we really do need, these are important deadlines that will have to be made. And of course, this is a very big decision point for the city council, exactly what that transition plan is going to look like. Another big issue about Blue Valley in the next steps, another really important decision point for the city council coming up, will be this idea about repurposing of the Blue Valley facility. It's generally thought that the location, condition, size, and construction of the Blue Valley facility suggests that it would be a prime candidate for repurposing as opposed to dismantling. While some remediation will definitely be necessary after the closure, some of this has already been done, including the ponds, ash ponds. But I mean, obviously, things like the old coal chutes, the smokestack, these things, the remediation is going to have to be done. But once that is done, there is a pretty significant facility there that could be reused. In addition to possible reuse by the city in a variety of ways, the site might prove to be of interest to others as well. And of course, the city's been contacted by people unsolicited, over the last couple of years, from people with ideas, but we need to kind of start talking about taking this to the next level. So ideally, repurposing should begin as soon as possible after the closure of the plant. Accordingly, the city manager recently retained a company called Lynch Consulting Services to begin a preliminary assessment of repurposing options for presentation to the city council, which that will then lead to a formal RFP process, request for proposal process, to select a repurposing idea. The consultant is expected to have their initial assessment report completed by sometime in November. So, and again, this would only be a list of ideas, and I know you all have ideas, and people have shared with you ideas all the way from a brewery to another community center to, industrial uses to, a variety of things. So we really, this report will try to identify possibilities, which that hopefully then will help the council decide what direction they want to request for proposals to go. So now turning our attention from Blue Valley to the combustion turbines. Again, how did we get to where we are today? Well, in addition to evaluating Blue Valley, the 2018 Energy Master Plan also looked at the 6 combustion turbines that we have. In that report, Burns & McDonnell determined that the city's best option, at least in the near term, is to continue to operate the existing CTs. In 2019, as we already mentioned, the city issued a power supply RFP, which ended up with the Oneta contract, but it provided updated market costs about revenue that can be produced, from selling energy, and that information was fresher than what was used in the master plan. So earlier this summer, I asked city staff to revisit the 2018 Burns and McDonald study in light of the new market information that was obtained in 2019 and see if it made a difference into that conclusion. And the results of that analysis seem to indicate that the city's best interest still is to continue to operate the existing turbines for the next few years. Current status of those CTs. The CTs date back to the 1960s and 70s, and so obviously they are nearing the end of their useful lives, but they have been well maintained, and that was noted in the Burns and McDonald report. Despite their age, they can be expected to last several more years depending on maintenance and replacement of components. I believe that report, at one point, it talks about how they could even, some could last 20 more years, but if they're practically rebuilt, which is probably not feasible, but they probably quite certainly could last a few more years. And these units not only provide, they're actually called upon frequently by Southwest Power Pool. And if you might remember from that energy master plan, two of the units, the J units, were not called on as frequently as the others, but they're all called upon some. And the 6 CTs, whether they're called upon or not, they provide a considerable amount of the capacity that we are required to provide to buy power from SPP. And they provide 93 megawatts. This compares to 45 megawatts at Blue Valley that we're currently replacing with the Onetta contract. You know, if you remember Blue Valley, it was had a lot more capacity than that originally, but units 1 and 2 no longer work. Unit 3 is the one that still works, and that 45 megawatts will be lost when that's shut down. That's what's going to be replaced with Onetta. So you can see that these 6 CTs, they are very important to our overall capacity portfolio, whether they're called upon or not. Now, the cost to replace the CT capacity would be significant, considering that the Onetta contract for the 45 megawatts is $13.6 million, so you can see that 93 megawatts is going to be a lot, will be twice that. But it'd actually be more than that because there'll be transmission costs, some serious transmission costs associated with having that capacity offsite, and that's kind of tipped the scales over in that report to indicate that the CTs are, at this time, probably no alternative is cheaper than keeping them running right now, realizing that is not a long-term solution. A long-term solution has to be found. But right at this moment, they're probably the cheapest thing you can do. But the council is going to have to decide when do they pull the trigger on change. So talking about next steps on those combustion turbines. As I just said, a major decision point for the city council will be to establish a timeline for the CTs, including how long they should continue in service and when they should be replaced with other sources of capacity. And what those sources of capacity will be. IPL should use this grace period right now, when CTs are still in use, to stabilize finances and prepare for the financial impact of replacing those CTs in the near future. The city should continue to monitor the condition and performance of the CTs, as well as the relative costs and benefits of various options for replacing the CT capacity. A plan for replacement of the CTs, including a financial component, should be developed for future council consideration. So that is the presentation and the update that the city council is going to have at an upcoming council meeting. And but they wanted you all to see it first. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take a stab at those. And
Okay, anybody got a question? Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the councilman and the mayor for remanding this presentation back to us. It was very disappointing when the day before it was going to be presented, we were given, the day went onto the agenda, we met, and we didn't have this presentation at that time. That was very disappointing at that time, but I really appreciate what the mayor and the city council has done, and the city manager, to remand it back for us to look at. Besides the issue of comparing apples and oranges on the budget side. I'd like to look at something, the 23 people that we are going to keep for the CTs, correct?
The report recommends 23.
Well, I'm just asking a question. Right now, can we say that we have 4 people every day working management, admin, or engineering to do nothing but work on the CTs? Can anybody?
You're
Could we
wanting
ask
to
the
know what the
production
23
manager?
people would do?
No. Do we have 4 people with their jobs devoted to monitoring the CT operation right now?
Well, luckily, we do have our production manager here, and Elaine Kafis is over here too, who works in
Right.
operations of production.
Well, let's
I'm
ask
sure
them.
they could. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer
Sure.
your question if they can get a handle on what it is exactly that
No, I'm not
you're asking.
I understand exactly what you're asking.
I think they're just wanting to know why would it be 23 and not 22 and
No.
20
Well,
or-
I'll get to that. Let me
Oh.
finish.
Are the guys working on the CTs?
Why do you have 4 people that's either management, admin, or engineering every day devoted to the operation of the CT?
I'm going to ask you where the number 4 comes from.
Your report that was presented in the agenda, all these numbers I'm going to present come from the packet that went out
Was it in the
with the
Burns and
agenda.
Mac report?
No, it came out last week when it was presented to the city council. And on top of that, do we have 10
That's
operators
from the
right
Burns and
now?
Mac report. Yeah, that's from the Burns and Mac report.
Do we have 10 operators handling the CTs right now every day?
They
So basically-
also include Blue Valley right now.
Well, according to this, you're going to need 4 managers, admin, engineering to manage the 6 CTs that we currently have.
Yes, you need them.
You need that.
Yes.
And you're going to need 10 operators every day to manage the 6 CTs.
Maybe not that many.
And 8 folks that dedicated to maintenance for those CTs.
Yes, you have to understand it's not just mechanical. It's technical, it's electrician.
So if we went out to a CT right now, would we see maintenance out there?
They may not be out there today if everything's fixed.
Okay.
They're in the shop. We have one gearbox.
And then we
we're
have
working
one
on.
person that's devoted at the storeroom to nothing but the CTs?
We don't have any storeroom people in production anymore.
Huh. Well, evidently we're going to. I'm just saying, looking off of the data you're presenting to us, I think the number of 23 is exaggerated to the point that it's almost embarrassing for the 6 CTs that are in production right now.
And the only thing I think I would like to respond on that is the number 23 came from the Burns and Mac Energy Master Plan. That's their number. And as I said in this presentation, the actual number will have to be determined by experience. Maybe 23 is too many. What I'm trying to say is that that's what their study said. So that's a kind of a good place to start this discussion about a transition plan.
Well,
if it needs to be 18 people instead of 17 people in a transition plan, maybe that you might have a point. I don't know. That's what we'll have to determine. But
Well,
I'm
what
just
you're
being-
trying to sell to
I'm not
the
trying to
city
sell you.
council, no, whatever the Burns and Mac study is telling the city council, they can only go off of the data in which they receive it. Just like when you compare the budgeted hours, people versus actual people, the same thing holds true that you're saying that you need 23 people. You
No.
made the statement, we're going to be having to transition 17 employees, right?
Well, Mark, I think what I'm trying to tell you is that the actual number will be determined. The city manager will determine that number. Experience will help determine what it is. The number 23 came from a study from Burns and McDonnell, and that's a great place to start talking about this transition plan.
Okay.
So I don't know what's a better number to start the conversation, which this is an update. And so if you remember,
I would think a
if
number-
you go back to my slide, it'll say the Burns and McDonnell report said as many as 23 would be retained. I did not say that we have determined that is the
I would think the
absolute correct
starting
number.
point might be getting out of our office, going down and saying, how many people are actually devoted to combustion turbines today?
And
When you say 2 of them aren't even running, so we're going to be looking at 4 combustion
Oh,
turbines.
that's incorrect right there. But what I was trying to tell you was that
You said 2, that broke down.
Didn't you just say 2 were not running?
I'm talking about Blue Valley. I was saying Blue Valley.
Oh, so we have all of our combustion turbines run
Right.
every day?
I'm sure Marty can tell you the status. One of them is down right this minute. 5 are operating.
Okay.
But I think what we're just trying to tell you was that this was an update. It was referring to that study. It said, I think we're saying the same thing, but my way of saying it was the actual number will be determined. And I think that's what you're trying to say. I'm trying to say I'm not going to determine what the number is this minute right here. I'm just saying the Burns and Mac report said it was 23. But
And-
my next point on that very slide was the actual number is to be determined.
And I guess what I'm saying is, hopefully, if the council and the mayor and everybody's watching, I would challenge that Burns and McDonald report to the nth degree, because I believe it's not accurate. And I think that we've proven that the Burns and Mac work that they've done for the city has not been the best that it could be. And that's all I'm saying. I'm totally in agreement of shutting down Blue Valley. I applaud the effort for the resolution, but when it comes to the combustion turbines, I'm very concerned about keeping the combustion turbines. And I'd also like to know what happened to the motion that was presented on July the 18th, asking for the study for the combustion turbines being shut down and purchasing energy. That was not in your presentation either.
I'm not. Would you? What now? What? Are you, I'm not sure. I
On
understand what you're talking about.
July the 18th,
Okay.
the PUAB approved a motion. It said, per Independence Missouri City Charter, Section 3.164, I move that the PUAB request the city manager to assign the necessary resources to perform an investigation analysis of the continued use of the existing IPL combustion turbines. The analysis would include the net present value of continuing to own and maintain our current inventory of aged combustion turbines. The analysis should consider the costs related to current planning requiring a staffing of 23 employees versus administrative personnel versus purchasing equal quantity of energy with a black startup capacity. That was presented to you personally here on July the 18th.
Yes. And so now that I kind of know what you're talking about. Yeah. So
I'm glad you-
one of my slides indicated that what we did was we went back and did a new report, which you just referenced was attached to the presentation, which said that it looked like that it confirmed what was in the Burns and Mac study done in 2018, which indicated that continued operation of the CTs appears to be the cheapest alternative at this time.
Did we get it? The study?
Well, you asked that a study be done, and we did one.
Oh, so you did it, and you didn't disclose
Just
the
got
result.
it done and attached it to the council agenda. And if you don't have it, I can certainly get a copy of it to you.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, we as the board would love to see it.
If I might interject here, Mark, I appreciate your effort on this presentation, but you have to understand, I came on this board over a year ago, and we've been addressing this power and light issue every meeting. And Burns and McDonald come in here, and we paid them an outrageous fee, I thought, and told us we couldn't raise our rates, lower our rates. We had to raise them. And then 2 months later, after hard work by other people in the city, told Burns and McDonald we could. So Burns and McDonald come back and gave us a report we could reduce our rates. So when we're questioning these studies, I'm not questioning you. I'm questioning your studies. We waste money on Burns and McDonald, and all of a sudden they change. I don't know how. One month you can say no, you can't lower your rates because you'll go broke, and there's no way to do it. And then 2 months later, from pressure from somebody, I don't know who, but they said, "Oh yeah, well we can reduce that. That's fine." Somebody's not giving us the right information, or we're not getting the right information, and you expect us to support And every time we say something, and it's come up time and time again, I don't know whether Christine puts them in the minutes. It's even went down to the water department. It happened last time. You turn around and say, well, I don't care what you do. It's already passed. So what are we doing here? Dan, I was surprised, told me that last meeting. He said, well, I don't care what you do. We already signed a contract with Sugar Creek, you know. So if you really don't care, why do you bring us reports? And Burns and McDonnell, I'm telling you, I wish I owned that company because I'd be feasting off of independence. It's ridiculous the amount of money we pay them for the reports we get, and then they change in 1 month just because somebody requested or showed them a way. If we can show them a way, and I see on this report we're hiring more consultants to do this and do that, and everybody in this room knows what needs to be done. At least I think they do. At least a lot of these people on this board do. As far as transition of people, it's all it is standing up and doing it. It doesn't take genius to figure that out. You just have to get rid of the CTs. As far as I'm concerned, they should have been shut down yesterday. And we go to Dogwood, buy the capacity out of Dogwood to cover until we get on that end here. That'd be the easiest thing to do, and probably the cheapest at the price of power today.
Well, I'm trying to go back to what the presentation was about, which was an update which referenced 23 positions, which was in the Burns and Mac report, which is the perfect place to start discussion about transition. We'll have to actually determine what the actual right number is. And as I said also in the presentation, whether or not to keep the CTs is a major decision point for the city council. As I said in the presentation, it's not a long-term solution to keep the CTs in operation. But right now, it is obviously the cheapest thing. If to buy 90-some megawatts of power at Dogwood would cost about $45 million. So their cost is about $500,000 per megawatt. So I'm not saying they're not the best option. I'm just saying there's no option cheaper than what you're doing right now, but we need to look at what is the best option for replacing that capacity. And so all we're saying is the presentation is that the council has a big decision to make. You will get to make a recommendation on that decision. We're not making the decision about whether to about doing anything with the CTs today. This was trying to give you what the status is and to identify what the future decision points are for the council.
And I appreciate that, Mark.
Okay. So if you have any questions about the presentation, we'd love to visit about them.
Well, we're past the presentation. I have questions about consultants that we're hiring to assist in human resources and all this other stuff, so we're going to spend more money. And I have just one question, Mark, first. Maybe you can answer this. How many people does it take to start up a CT?
Actually started? One.
One. Thank you.
How many does it take to maintain it and keep it operational, make sure it doesn't catch on fire?
I just asked how many started.
I think I get passionate about when I look at an analysis, and I can see that there's issues with it, Mark. And we've brought issues up in the past, and I truly understand. You're just the messenger of this presentation that come from Burns and Mac, and you've pieced it together, and it's nothing personal towards you. But the point that I'm most passionate about is our bosses are the ratepayers, whether it's citizens of Independence or it's the industrial users of Independence. And our role, it's very well spelled out in the charter, is to advise. And when we don't get the analysis, we get analysis that, in my opinion, are full of holes. That inhibits us from being able to do an effective job to advise the city council on what we see as just another set of eyes. These folks here make the decision, and we truly understand that. But at the same time, we've had a couple of projects that we've done and we've endorsed, and it's come back to haunt us because I don't think we actually got the true story. And that's why we've asked so many additional questions, like the CT issue. It's obvious that we'll not take 23 people to manage 6 CTs. And it's obvious that there's been reductions at the production side because we really haven't been producing any electricity, even though I do know there has been a spike recently. But I want you to know it's nothing about you personally. It's just that I have a real concern with incentive. What incentive does someone have to make it look like we need 23 people to run those 6 CTs? Or what incentive is it for somebody to say, well, we've gone from a budgeted 60 people down to actually 40? There's some real incentives. I don't know that anybody on this board has any incentive, but other than to look at data and make a determination one way or the other. So I just wanted you to know
Again,
that.
the purpose
Thank
really
you.
here, you saw the master plan in 2018. The 23 number is in that report. I don't remember you having a big debate about it in 2018, but I certainly welcome that you be part of deciding what the right number is. But again, the only purpose here today was to repeat what the study said, which was close Blue Valley, which you agree with, and that will impact employees. You want to argue with what the specific number impacted is? You could be right. As I said, that needs to be determined. All I was trying to do is tell you what it said in the report. So
Right.
now we
And you
all
bring up an
agree that
excellent
what we
point.
need to do now, the council needs to decide what they're going to do. And
But for future
forward.
information, and you bring up an excellent point, the Master Energy Plan does bring up 23 positions, but only until the agenda came out I think it was last Friday, or the week before Friday, I don't know, I think it was last Friday, did we get the breakdown that our production manager hadn't seen that actually showed what the positions are going to do. And when you see that, you see it's obvious that number makes no sense whatsoever. So I do agree. It came out in 2018,
Yeah.
and it did not break down what the actual functions were going to be. It's my hope that the city council will take that in consideration, that really you're putting it upon them to be experts in the field of production, electrical production, transmission, and distribution. And quite frankly, I'm not sure. I think some of them would be pretty good at it, but not everyone. Just like us. We only take what you give us and try and discern what's real and what's not. Thank you.
Can I make a comment? It seems to me we're spending a lot of time talking about 23. And I don't think that's a role for this. We're getting down in the weeds. We're not. Our role is to talk about policy. It isn't talk about management. When I read the city manager, he doesn't talk about 23. He talks about how many personnel will we retain. I trust the city manager that is his role. He is responsible for making management decisions. And I think that's who we hire to make the management decisions. I trust him to do that. And I trust him to do the analysis, to manage IPL. And I think that's where we should be placing our emphasis, to hold him responsible and not to get down in the weeds and say, it should be 23 or 24 or 22. I don't know if 23 is the right number. I don't know if 20 is the right number. And I'm not going to try and figure that out. And I don't think any of us should try and figure it out. I think we're wasting our time to be doing that. I think we should place the responsibility on the person who has the responsibility. That's all I'm going to say.
I think that's fair. Mr. Chairman, there is questions from a board member and a member of the public. I don't know what we are doing as far as taking questions, but I just want to.
Question from the public. This is an open meeting. It's an open meeting in the public, but not.
Thank you. Yes, I have a question regarding the schedule. It seems as if, well, it doesn't say, we have to get approval from SPP. Then we enter into a June 1 contract with Oneta. But yet, and then we seem to be wanting to establish a date to shut down Blue Valley. Why are we doing that? If you showed us slides that says that it's bringing in new revenue, and it's called upon numerous times lately to generate. Southwest Power Pail is not going to complain if we've got too much capacity.
Well, it's not, even with operating as much as it is, it's not the cheapest way to provide the 45 megawatts of capacity, even with the new revenue. The point is, you have to keep it in operational condition to get credited for the 45 megawatts, but you could get that without operating. You still have to have the employees because you have to have the ability to operate, but it doesn't have to operate. What we're trying to show there is that by operating, that makes new variable costs, not the base cost, but variable costs for additional fuel and additional manpower and everything. They're making revenue over that. So it's better to be operating than not operating, but it's still, even with that revenue, it's still better to replace that capacity with a less expensive source of capacity.
I'm not indicating on a long-range use. I know Blue Valley's old and deteriorated, but why not take advantage of that new income as long as we can?
Well, I'm just saying that the net, though, is you'd still be better off making the switch to Oneta as soon as you possibly can, because every day you're losing money doing this, even with that new revenue compared to the Oneta contract. So as soon as you can make the change, it should be done. It appears that 6 months is the proper period to do it after we have the transmission number. And so June 1st has sort of been tentatively established as a date, which has been, I think you all saw this in a resolution several months ago I don't believe it was passed, but the council at one time had prepared a draft resolution, then they pulled it back thinking that it required additional thought. And that basically has been reworked. I think it was Councilman Van Camp that provided at that time. And so there's a resolution before you now, which has been sent down, which is roughly the same, and it's establishing that June 1st is the actual date. Because as I said in the presentation, at some point the council has to set a date for closure. And so the resolution is they're wanting to set that date, and they're asking you all if you agree. So based on their best knowledge of the situation, that's the date they would recommend.
Thank you, Mark. I think at this point, we've heard your presentation, and you sit down and have a seat so we can look you in the eye across the tables.
Thank you.
We need to go to action item number D, and I think that'll answer some more of the questions that we had earlier. And I don't know about anybody else on the board. Has everybody read this resolution and studied it? And the way I understand it in this resolution, Mark, I wish the city manager was here or
Right.
somebody, and maybe you can answer. It says here, retirement of Blue Valley plant, including ceasing power generation by Blue Valley units 1, 2, and 3. And we're saying we're going to shut down those 3 immediately, or is that what we're saying?
June 1st.
June the 1st.
Yeah, one and 2 are not operating now anyway, but 3 would be shut down on June 1st.
Why just 3?
Well, 1 and 2 don't work now, and so we're not repairing them in anticipation of closure.
Yeah, but you say June the 1st, that's when we're signing with Oneta, right?
Right.
So why aren't you not shutting down the other 3?
No,
What
this
other
is-
3?
This is units at Blue Valley.
Oh, at Blue Valley.
Yeah, 3 units at Blue Valley.
Okay. I stand corrected. Thank you. There's nothing in here that, in this resolution that asks or tells me that we are approving or disapproving a date. Are we to come up with a date that we think Blue Valley should be shut down.
Well, I hope it's in there.
Section 1.
Is it in the first one there?
June 1st.
June the 1st?
Yeah, it's supposed to be in there.
Okay.
On or before.
On
yep.
or before.
Section 1. Thank you, Sarah.
Can we do it December 1st?
It's June 1st.
Can we do it December 1st?
Well, you don't have a replacement capacity until June 1st because that's
Well-
when the NETA contract starts.
How much of that, again, I come back to you, to pick up that capacity, how hard is it to go to Dogwood and get it?
Well, you still have to get SPP to approve it, and you have to
What?
pay for it. And we've already got this contract, which was lower than any other option. So you might as well just keep this plant going until you can replace it with the Oneta contract. In the meanwhile, then probably a RFP needs to be, or like I said, an analysis needs to be done about the CTs, and if the decision is to replace them, you'd probably want to do a similar RFP as we did with the Blue Valley for replacement capacity for the CTs.
He's got something.
Not quite a timing issue, but the substation outside of Blue Valley is referred to as Substation A. It's very critical and important to the city's network that stays healthy and running. And I guess my concerns are future use with security. Do we just walk off and leave it out there in the dark, or?
Well, the service center is not going anywhere. So we're still going to be in that location. We're just talking about the plant. So the substation would still be
Obviously,
operating, and so would the service center. So no, we're not we're not just walking off in the site. It's just talking about closing the plant. And, of course, one of the options, and I hate to even talk about options because that's what needs to be studied. But, it was one of the councilmen, as mentioned in a meeting that, hey, it's just you said because of the substation there that, wow, maybe a replacement CTs or reciprocating engines could be placed there. But again, that's that's a cost benefit analysis. Is that the cheapest or way to replace the capacity? But that then goes, so there's a little bit of correlation between repurposing the building and those in the CT replacement in a way, but you're right. It's important for people to know that we're not walking away from the whole facility, that we're still going to be major presence there, even without the generating capacity there.
thank you.
Well, hopefully this is the appropriate time. I'd like to make a motion that we endorse the resolution that was presented to us by the city manager, and I truly believe that it is in the right direction. It's something that I know that our board has worked for quite some time, and I only hope that we would be able to close it sooner rather than later. And they definitely, I think, I like the motion to approve it.
Second motion.
Okay, I got a motion and second. Is there any discussion? Any more discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote. Roll call vote, please.
Larry Porter,
Yes.
Jack Looney,
Yes.
Garland Land,
Yes.
Joe Zack,
Yes.
Mark McDonald,
Yes.
Rick Dreher.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously. Okay.
Could I ask a question about?
Well, I asked if there's any more questions, but go ahead.
On the presentation, where it talks about that we'll have to stabilize the finances is when we replace the CTs. What alternatives are there for stabilizing the finances? I can think of two, and I'm just wondering what your thinking is. One would be that we increase our reserves, so that, and the other would be that we pay down our
Yeah.
financing?
Yeah, we're right now, for example, the council's considering approval of major industrial development. That is, I think we're going to see new electric customers coming with economic development plans that are kind of in the pipeline. So that's one. Two, as you know, you've been briefed on before, we're intending to make another filing for additional transmission revenue. And Sarah knows more about that than I do. It's basically a legal proceeding, but that could result in perhaps a couple $1 million a year if we're successful in our application. We also, the Blue Valley closure is going to result in net savings to the city. And so, and of course, we're always looking to continue. As you know, we just recently cut $8.1 million in operating expenses to correspond with the 6% rate reduction. So we're constantly still looking whenever we can for efficiencies and things we can do. So I'm not saying that so there may be some other things there. So there are several ways where we believe that we can get the finances for Power and Light in a good, sustainable position going forward. So that's all I was kind of referencing there. A few, in recent years, expenditures have exceeded revenues, to a great extent because of capital improvements that are necessary to keep the system up. But that's not a long-term sustainable practice. So we also have to get the financial leg of the stool correct. So we have to get rates low, which I think we've made great progress on that. We need to keep our reliability up, which is, again, it's the top award-winning reliability, but there's also the financial leg of the stool that we have to make sure it's in good shape for the future. So that's kind of what I was getting at. We got some things on the horizon. It would sure be nice to get some of those things done and take that into account when we're talking about this capacity replacement, particularly if there's a debt service aspect to it. You don't want to borrow a lot of money if it really strains the finances to try to be making those debt payments. So that's what I was trying to get out on that slide.
Okay, being vice chairman in charge of ICE, I'm declaring Independence Power and Light closed now. We'll go to Dan. You have anything?
No, I don't have anything today. I was just visiting.
Support.
Okay. Do I hear a motion
Yeah, I'm
to adjourn? I got a motion to adjourn
Second.
and a second. Roll call to adjourn. You have to do that? Yes.
Larry Porter,
Yes.
Jack Looney.
Yes.
Garland Land.
Yes.
Joe Zach.
Yes.
Mark McDonald.
Please.
Rick Dreyer.
Yes.
Adjourned.